Alright, so now we're going to do our green backgrounds for our foliage. So I again have 3 different shades of green, both in the Distress and the Oxide. I've got old paper, bundled sage, and peeled paint, exactly the same colors in the 2 different inks. Old paper, even though this cover looks brown, it's got a green tone to it. So for this, it's just a nice light green. The only difference between this one and the red background is I only need a half of a 8.5 by 11 sheet. Once again, it is the mixed media paper. You need to make sure that it is a paper that can handle the moisture and the water. And I'm going to smush each one of these in different sections. And again, if you didn't have both the oxides and the regular Distress, you could do it with either or. You don't necessarily have to have both. I just like the look of the 2 of them together. All right, so that one covered the background a lot better. Let's dry it off. And once again, this is going to be die cut as well, so it doesn't need to be a perfect background. Because the piece of paper is smaller, though, it's going to be a lot easier to completely cover the whole background so that I won't have white spots in it. But if there happens to be any white spots, I'm sure this will be gone by the end of inking this background. But if there's any, we are going to do a little bit of inking because I like the center of my die cuts to be a little bit darker, just give it a little bit more dimension. And again, this doesn't have to be 100% dry. 80–90% is good. And again, I'm dipping it into those dots 2 or 3 times. If you want to, if you feel it needs more and want to do it 4, 5, 6 times, you absolutely can. It's completely your choice. Because we're using the same colors from the color family, you're not going to get mud. It's just going to make it more textured looking. The one thing to make sure, though, between working from your red and your green, you want to make sure that your surface is completely cleaned. Because if you didn't already know, red and green together make brown, and we don't want our foliage brown, or at least I don't. So dip it in, dry it off. Even though this looks like a hairdryer, it's not a hairdryer. It emits heat, it doesn't blow air. You can't really use a hairdryer for this unless you have a really low setting, because if you used a hairdryer, it would just start blowing these pools of water around. And we want them to stay in the same general area because I'm trying to get this texture to it. I'm not trying to just create a green background. I want to have the texture with it because I think it looks a lot more interesting for what we're doing. If you end up having a pool, like for instance this here, that you don't like, I don't mind it, so I'm just going to leave it there. You can take a piece of paper towel and dab it up just to get some of the excess moisture out of there. I think if this was a background for a card or something, I would probably worry about it or maybe get that out of there. But because it is a background that we're going to die cut and we're only going to see bits and pieces, I don't typically worry too much about certain areas because I can always avoid them with a die cut if I really don't like that area. All right, probably should be a little bit more dry, but that's okay. We're going to tap it in there. Oh yeah, see, I got a little bit too much in that one area, but that's okay. Sometimes I get a little bit impatient because I don't want the video to run too long. But once again, this is all being die cut, so it's going to be totally fine. And you're just going to keep this same process. You're going to repeat it until you feel that you're done, until you like the look of it. You could even just do that first layer and leave it at that. If you just liked that and you didn't want to add any of these splotches, if that's not your thing, you don't necessarily have to. It's your project. You can do exactly what you want. So I like most of it, but I want a little bit more dots in here. So next, I'm going to do one more tap in my little paint dots just to get some more texture in that particular area. And then I think I'm done this section. These backgrounds can get addicting though. If you're new to them, I definitely recommend starting with one color family like greens or reds or whatever till you get the technique down, and then you can start playing around with different color families. If you get to gung-ho with 100 different colors or a bunch of different colors at once, you're going to end up with brown. So just play around with it, get used to how the technique works and how the inks blend with each other, and then start experimenting with a couple colors at a time. There we go. So now I'm going to get a little bit of texture in there, I think right there, a little bit from there. And I mean, you can see on your mat here where the dark sections are and where the light sections are, so you can control a little bit what's going where, but this is much better because it's got more texture to it. So you can use your heat gun to dry it, or you can leave it. I'm just going to let it air dry, and once it's completely dry, the next step is we're going to take it to our die cutting machine and we're going to start die cutting our foliage out of it. Oh, look how cool that looks. I love it.